The neon glow of the Graceland jukebox cast long, shifting shadows across the vast living room, painting the velvet drapes in hues of deep purple and electric blue. Elvis Presley sat alone, a half-empty glass of iced tea beside him, the silent hum of the sprawling mansion doing little to soothe the restless thrum beneath his skin. Outside, the Memphis night was still, yet inside, his mind was a whirlwind of concert halls, screaming fans, flashing cameras, and the relentless pressure of being Elvis. He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, a weary sigh escaping his lips. It wasn't that he wasn't grateful. Good Lord, he was. He had more than he'd ever dreamed of. Fame, fortune, adoration that bordered on worship. But lately it felt less like a gift and more like a golden cage. Every step was scrutinized, every word weighed, every casual outing a carefully choreographed event. He couldn't walk down a street, couldn't grab a burger at a diner, couldn't even just be without a dozen watchful eyes on him. The sheer weight of it all, the constant performance, was starting to press down on him, suffocating the simple, carefree boy he once was. His gaze drifted to a framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a sepia-toned image of a younger, leaner Elvis, grinning, perhaps a little mischievous. Before the world truly knew his name, before the king back then, joy was simple. It was strumming a guitar on his porch. It was sharing a laugh with his mama. It was the thrill of a Friday night movie. And it was bumper cars. The smell of ozone and hot metal, the jarring lurch as two cars collided, the pure, unadulterated squeal of laughter escaping his lungs as he dodged and weaved, a master of a miniature arena. He remembered the feeling of freedom, the exhilaration of chasing and being chased, the utter lack of consequence. No lyrics to remember, no moves to perfect, no audience to impress. Just pure, unbridled fun. He sat up straighter, a spark igniting in his tired eyes. Bumper cars. That was it. That was what he needed. Not a grand gesture, not a new album, not another movie. Just the raw, simple joy of those clumsy electric vehicles. But how could Elvis Presley, the biggest star on the planet, go ride bumper cars without causing a riot? He couldn't just show up at a local carnival. The very thought was absurd. His security detail would have heart attacks. The fans would swarm. It would turn into a spectacle, precisely what he was trying to escape. Then an even more absurd yet strangely brilliant idea took root. What if he didn't just go to an amusement park? What if he rented the whole darn thing just for himself for a few hours? Just to ride those glorious bumper cars, to reclaim a piece of the boy he used to be? The idea, wild as it was, brought a genuine smile to his face, a smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. It was outrageous. It was extravagant. It was exactly what he needed. He reached for the phone, his fingers hovering over the dial. Who would even handle such a request? The Colonel. No, the Colonel would turn it into a publicity stunt. Probably try to sell tickets to watch him ride. Not this time. This was personal. This was for him. He thought of Joe Esposito, his loyal road manager, and one of his closest friends. Joe, who understood the pressures, who saw beyond the rhinestone jumpsuits, Joe who could make the impossible happen. With a newfound determination, Elvis picked up the receiver and began to dial the hum of the phone line. A stark contrast to the quiet excitement bubbling within him. "Joe," he said when the sleepy voice answered, "I need you to do something for me. Something a little different." Paused, letting the silence hang, then grinned into the phone. "I want to rent an amusement park, and I want to ride the bumper cars." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end, followed by a grunt that sounded like a half-choke, half-laugh. "Elvis, are you all right? It's 3 in the morning." "Never better," Joe Elvis chuckled. The sound deep and genuine. "Never better find me a park anywhere. I just need a few hours alone with those bumper cars." He felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years, a tremor of pure anticipation. The weight of the gold lamp for a fleeting moment seemed to lift. he was already halfway there, back to the joyful clatter of those simple machines. Joe Esposito, bleary-eyed but ever loyal, stared at the phone receiver like it had just proposed a trip to the moon, rent an amusement park for bumper cars. Elvis was known for his extravagant whims, from private jets to fleets of Cadillacs. But this was a new level of delightful absurdity. Yet there was an earnestness in Elvis's voice, a quiet plea that Joe, who knew his friend's heart better than most, couldn't ignore. "He wants what?" A bewildered Colonel Parker boomed over the phone the next morning, his cigar smoke a hazy cloud even through the telephone line. "A whole park just for bumper cars? What's the angle, Joe? Is he shooting a new movie? A commercial for some ride manufacturer?" "No angle, Colonel," Joe sighed, rubbing his temples. "He just wants to ride them alone, for fun." The Colonel scoffed. "Fun? Elvis Presley doesn't have fun without a camera crew and a press release. This is lunacy, Joe. Think of the expense, the logistics." But Joe was already at work. He'd seen the exhaustion in his friend's eyes, the way the light behind them seemed to dim more and more with each roaring crowd. This wasn't just a whim. It was a desperate gasp for simple air. He started making calls, navigating a labyrinth of entertainment, conglomerates, and local park managements. The initial reactions ranged from outright laughter to suspicious disbelief. "Is this a prank call? Elvis Presley wants to rent our park for himself." Finally, after dozens of calls, a small, privately owned amusement park in a quiet, out-of-the-way town, about an hour from Memphis, Adventureland, surprisingly agreed to consider it. They were struggling, hit hard by declining attendance and rising costs. The offer of a substantial, no-questions-asked fee for a single night, provided absolute discretion was guaranteed, was too tempting to refuse. Mr. Henderson, Adventureland's aging, weary manager, listened to Joe's carefully worded proposal over the phone. "So he wants the park empty?" Joe explained patiently. "Just Mr. Presley and minimal staff to operate the rides, of course. Utmost secrecy. No press, no photos, no exceptions." Henderson scratched his chin. "Sounds peculiar. But the money, you say, is quite generous." "More than generous, Mr. Henderson, and a bonus if discretion is perfectly maintained." Joe knew how to sweeten the deal. A long pause. Then Henderson's voice, a little less weary, came through. "All right, Mr. Esposito. We can do this. The park closes at 10 p.m. We can have it ready for him from 11 p.m. And whatever else he fancies, we'll keep a skeleton crew." "My lips are sealed," Joe breathed a sigh of relief. "Excellent. We'll send over the paperwork and the first installment immediately." When Joe told Elvis, a childlike grin spread across his face. "Adventureland, huh? Sounds just right, thanks. Joe, you're the best." Over the next few days, the anticipation grew. Elvis found himself humming old tunes, his steps lighter. He wasn't thinking about his next record or his movie contract. He was thinking about the perfect bumper car strategy, about the thrill of impact. He even found himself looking through old photo albums, pulling out pictures from his childhood trips to fairs, reliving those innocent days. He instructed Joe to pick out a caz. He wanted to blend into the shadows of the deserted park, a ghost revisiting, a cherished memory. The secrecy was paramount. Only Joe, the driver, and a couple of trusted security guards knew the full extent of the plan. They were instructed to maintain a low profile, almost invisible. This wasn't a security detail. It was a bubble of privacy. On the appointed night, a subtle buzz of excitement hummed through Graceland. Elvis tried to act normal, watching TV, chatting with his family, but his mind was already miles away, envisioning the silent, glittering lights of the amusement park waiting just for him. He felt a nervous flutter in his stomach, the kind he used to get before a big show. But this was different. This was excitement of a purer kind. This was about rediscovering joy, one bump at a time. The hours ticked by slowly, each one building the quiet thrill of his personal adventure. The moon hung high and full, a giant pearl against the inky velvet of the sky, as the discreet black limousine glided through the quiet, darkened streets. Elvis, tucked into the back seat, peered out the tinted window, his heart thrumming with a strange mix of anticipation and disbelief. It felt surreal, like a dream he'd cooked up in a moment of whimsical madness, now startlingly real. As they turned onto a secluded road, the first signs of Adventureland appeared. A towering Ferris wheel, its skeletal frame dark against the night, stood like a silent sentinel. Colorful, whimsical entrance arch, usually a kaleidoscope of activity and laughter, was now eerily quiet. Its lights dimmed to a soft, almost reverent glow. The car pulled up to a service entrance where a lone figure waited. Mr. Henderson, the park manager, a man whose weary eyes now held a spark of genuine curiosity, stepped forward. He looked older, more tired than his voice had suggested on the phone, his uniform slightly rumpled. He gave a curt nod to Joe. Then his gaze lingered on Elvis, a silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary guest who had graced his struggling park. Elvis stepped out, stretching his limbs. He was dressed exactly as he'd requested. Faded blue jeans, a simple white t-shirt, and a lightweight bomber jacket. No jewelry, no elaborate hairdo. He looked, for all intents and purposes, like any other man on a late-night outing, albeit a remarkably handsome one. Took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp night air mingled with the faint, lingering scent of popcorn and cotton candy. It was a familiar, comforting aroma, evocative of childhood fairgrounds. "Mr. Presley," Henderson said, his voice quiet, almost respectful. "Welcome to Adventureland. Everything's ready for you." Elvis offered a genuine, warm smile. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson, truly. This means a lot." His voice was lower, softer than the booming stage persona, a man simply expressing gratitude. Henderson seemed taken aback, perhaps expecting a more demanding superstar-like demeanor. "Follow me," he said, gesturing towards a dimly lit pathway. As they walked, the park unfurled around them. The carousel, usually a kaleidoscope of prancing horses and glittering mirrors, stood motionless, its painted eyes seeming to watch them. The swing ride, its chains clanking softly in the breeze, resembled a giant slumbering creature. The silence was profound, broken only by their footsteps and the distant hum of machinery keeping the park alive for its sole patron. It was a vastly different experience from the bustling, vibrant chaos he was used to. It was peaceful, almost meditative. And then he saw it, the bumper car arena. It sat in a wide open pavilion, its metal floor gleaming faintly under the low wattage lights. The grid of power lines above hummed, ready to conduct the electric thrill. The fleet of colorful bumper cars, reds, blues, yellows, sat neatly parked like eager, patient beasts. It wasn't the biggest, most modern arena he'd ever seen, but it was perfect. It was exactly as he remembered them. Simple, robust, inviting. A wave of pure, unadulterated nostalgia washed over him, so potent it almost brought a tear to his eye. He remembered a time when this was the height of excitement, a time before limousines and private jets, before millions of screaming fans, before the crushing weight of expectation. Back then it was just him, a few dollars in his pocket, and the promise of a joyful collision. He walked towards the arena, his pace quickening, drawn by an invisible force. He reached out his fingers, tracing the smooth rubber bumper of a bright red car. It felt solid, real, a tangible link to a forgotten past. Mr. Henderson, watching him from a respectful distance, saw something in Elvis's eyes he hadn't expected. Not arrogance, not impatience, but a quiet, almost vulnerable wonder. King was gone. In his place was a man simply looking for a moment of peace, a return to something innocent and pure. "Power's on, Mr. Presley," Henderson said, his voice gentler now. "Whenever you're ready." Elvis looked up, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. It was the smile of a man who had found what he was searching for, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet, forgotten corners of a deserted amusement park. "Ready?" he said, his voice barely a whisper, as he stepped towards the open door of a vibrant blue bumper car. A lifetime of fame momentarily forgotten in the thrill of a simple childhood joy. Elvis slipped into the driver's seat of the blue bumper car, the worn Plymouth giving way slightly beneath him. The steering wheel felt cool and smooth in his hands, familiar yet distant. It had been decades, he realized, since he'd sat in one of these. He adjusted himself, his long legs a little cramped in the small space. But he didn't mind. He pulled the lap bar down, securing himself, and felt a rush of anticipation he hadn't known in years. A young park employee, a lanky teenager named Billy, who looked incredibly nervous, stood by the control panel, his hands hovering over the switches. Mr. Henderson had introduced him as the ride operator, assuring Elvis that Billy was reliable and, more importantly, discreet. "Just hit the pedal, Mr. Presley," Billy stammered, his eyes wide. Elvis chuckled, a low rumbling sound that seemed to fill the quiet arena. "Call me Elvis, son. And don't you worry, I haven't forgotten." He pressed the accelerator pedal, and with a slight lurch, the car sprang to life, buzzing with electric energy. He started, slowly, tentatively navigating the open floor. The initial awkwardness was palpable. He bumped into the low railing a few times, his reflexes rusty. He almost went backward once, momentarily confusing the pedals. Billy watched a faint smile starting to form on his face, seeing the most famous man in the world struggle with a simple amusement park ride. Then, something clicked, a memory perhaps, of a youthful hand gripping the wheel, an instinct taking over. He began to weave the car, responding to his touch, gliding across the polished floor. He wasn't just driving, he was rediscovering a forgotten rhythm. He spotted another car, a bright yellow one sitting empty near the center. A mischievous glint appeared in his eyes. This was the point of it, wasn't it? The collision. He aimed the nose of his blue car directly at the yellow one, accelerating slightly. The impact was satisfying, a jolt that rattled his teeth but sent a wave of exhilarating laughter bubbling up from his chest. It was loud, chaotic, and utterly glorious. He spun around the car, sliding sideways, and aimed for another unoccupied vehicle. Wham! Another collision, another burst of laughter. He started to pick up speed, zipping around the arena, a blur of blue and denim. He bumped into the walls, he spun in circles, he reversed and charged forward. He wasn't thinking about his next concert or his latest single or the demands of his manager. He was just a kid again in a bumper car, lost in the simple, pure joy of it all. Billy, the ride operator, couldn't help but stare. It seemed plenty of people ride the bumper cars, but never anyone with such unbridled enthusiasm. The famous singer, the one who filled stadiums, was laughing like a schoolboy, completely unself-conscious. His famous sneer was gone, replaced by a wide-open-mouthed grin. His blue eyes, usually intense and guarded, sparkled with an almost innocent delight. Mr. Henderson, who had retreated to a bench at the edge of the arena, watched too, a rare, soft smile playing on his lips. He'd been skeptical of this whole enterprise, viewing it as another celebrity eccentricity. But watching Elvis, seeing the sheer raw happiness emanating from him, he understood. This wasn't about fame or money, this was about freedom. This was about a man finding a moment of authentic, unguarded joy. Elvis, meanwhile, was completely absorbed. He'd stopped trying to be graceful or perfect. He was just riding purely for the thrill of it. He'd zoom forward, then slam on the brakes, sending himself skidding. He'd swerve at the last minute, narrowly avoiding an imaginary collision, then loop back for a direct hit on a stationary car. The sound of the electric motors, the clatter of the cars, the occasional sparks from the ceiling grid. It was all a symphony of simple pleasure. He finally brought his car to a halt, leaning back slightly breathless, but grinning from ear to ear. His hair was a little mussed, his cheeks flushed with exertion and happiness. He felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. This was what he'd come for, this pure, unadulterated release. He looked at Billy, who was still staring, and winked. "All right, son, round two." Billy, flustered but undeniably charmed, finally broke into a wide smile. "Yes, sir, Mr. Presley. I mean Elvis Presley." He pressed a button, and the power surged back into the arena, ready for another round of glorious, joyful bumps. After what felt like an hour of relentless, joyous bumping, Elvis finally brought his car to a halt, leaning his head back against the seat. His muscles ached in the best possible way, a pleasant fatigue that replaced the nervous tension that usually resided in his body. He was breathless, his heart still thrumming with the afterglow of laughter. But it was a good kind of tired. A happy tired. He looked around the deserted arena. The other cars sat silent, waiting. He was alone, truly. Alone, and in this moment it felt like a luxury. No demands, no expectations. Just the quiet hum of the machinery and the lingering scent of ozone. Yet, as the initial rush subsided, a small, quiet thought surfaced. It would be nice to share this. Not with a crowd, not with reporters, but with someone who understood. Someone who could just ride. He looked over at Billy, the young ride operator who was still standing by the control panel, watching him with an expression of open fascination. Billy looked to be about 18, maybe 19, still growing into his lanky frame. His hair a little shaggy. He seemed shy, almost intimidated by Elvis's presence, but also genuinely intrigued. An idea sparked in Elvis's mind, simple and impulsive. He knew he wasn't supposed to interact much with the staff to maintain the air of privacy and exclusivity, but this wasn't about being the king. This was about humanity. He unbuckled his lap bar and slowly got out of the blue car. He walked towards the control panel, his steps easy and relaxed. Billy tensed slightly, his eyes widening further. "Hey, Billy?" Elvis said, his voice soft and friendly. "You ever get to rattled by the direct question?" Sometimes, Mr. Presley. After hours, when it's real quiet, me and some of the other guys." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable in the spotlight. "Well," Elvis said, a warm smile gracing his lips. "It's real quiet now, isn't it?" He gestured to the empty arena. "Why don't you join me for a few rounds? You can show me how it's really done." Billy's jaw dropped. "Me ride with you, Mr. Presley," he stammered, clearly flustered. Elvis chuckled. "Just Elvis, remember?" "And yeah, why not? There's plenty of cars. Come on, it'll be fun. I could use a little competition." He walked over to a red car, pulled open the door, and gestured for Billy to join him. Billy hesitated for only a moment, then a wide, boyish grin spread across his face, eclipsing his shyness. He practically sprinted to the yellow car closest to him, scrambling inside. "All right, Elvis mean," Billy called out, his voice now filled with a newfound confidence and excitement. Elvis got back into his blue car, the earlier weariness replaced by a fresh surge of energy. This was even better than he'd imagined. A shared moment of pure, unadulterated fun, with no hidden agendas, no expectations. Billy, once he got past the initial shock, was a surprisingly good driver. He was agile, weaving through the imaginary obstacles, his car a blur of yellow. He clearly knew the arena well. Elvis found himself genuinely challenged, a playful competitiveness rising within him. He laughed a deep, booming sound as Billy managed to broadside him, sending his blue car spinning. "All right, you little rascal," Elvis yelled good-naturedly as he recovered and gave chase. For the next half hour, the arena was filled with the sounds of two cars colliding, the hum of electricity, and the joyous shouts and laughter of a global superstar and a bewildered, ecstatic teenager. Billy, completely forgetting the iconic status of his companion, found himself treating Elvis like just another friend, yelling, "Look out," and "Gotcha," with genuine delight. Mr. Henderson, watching from his perch, felt a lump form in his throat. He saw his young employee, usually so reserved, come alive with a joy that was infectious, and he saw Elvis truly happy, truly free, in a way he imagined few people ever saw him. It wasn't about the money, he realized. It was about giving this man, this incredibly famous man, a tiny sliver of his ordinary youth back. And in doing so, he was allowing a piece of his own parked soul to shine. The simple act of sharing a bumper car ride had stripped away the layers of fame and status, leaving behind only two people caught in a moment of shared, unadulterated fun. The bumper car session with Billy had been a revelation. Elvis felt not just physically invigorated, but emotionally lighter. Sharing that pure, unadulterated fun with someone who genuinely appreciated it, and who saw him as more than just the king, had been a gift. Billy, blushing and still grinning, had eventually retreated back to his control panel. But the connection, however brief, lingered. Hours melted away in the quiet, deserted park. The moon began its slow descent, painting the sky in softer shades of bruised indigo and emerging rose. Elvis, feeling adventurous, decided to explore beyond the bumper car arena. He wasn't looking for thrill rides or roller coasters. Those held no appeal for him tonight. He yearned for the simple, gentle joys of a classic carnival. He wandered over to the carousel, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop. Mr. Henderson, who seemed to anticipate his desires, had already instructed Billy to power it up. The melodic, slightly tinny music began to play a waltz that echoed mournfully in the vast emptiness of the park. Elvis selected a magnificent white stallion, its eyes painted a soulful blue, and settled onto its saddle. As the carousel slowly began to turn, he felt a tranquil peace settle over him. The gentle rise and fall, the soft strains of the music, the blurred shapes of the park around him, it was hypnotic. He closed his eyes, letting the simple motion transport him back to a time when life was uncomplicated. He rode the carousel for several loops, a soft, contented smile on his face. He watched the light glint off the polished brass poles, listened to the rhythmic creak of the machinery, and just breathed. It was a moment of quiet contemplation, a stark contrast to the thundering applause and flashing lights of his usual world. Here, he was simply a man on a wooden horse, caught in a timeless dance. Next, he found himself drawn to the teacups, another gentle ride that promised simple spinning fun. Billy, anticipating his unspoken request, powered them up. Elvis chose a bright yellow cup and settled in, letting the centrifugal force gently push him against the padded seat. He spun himself slowly at first, then, with more abandon, feeling a giddy dizziness that brought another burst of laughter. It was silly, childish even, but it was his. Later, feeling a rumble in his stomach, he remembered the classic amusement park fare. He looked around for the concession stands. Most were dark and shuttered, but a small illuminated window near the main promenade caught his eye. Mr. Henderson had arranged for a skeleton staff in the main kitchen, preparing basic fare. He walked over to the counter, where an older woman with a kind smile was waiting. She looked as though she'd seen 1,000 summers at this park. "What can I get for you, Mr. Presley?" she asked, her voice calm and steady, completely unfazed by his presence. "Just a hot dog, ma'am," Elvis said, feeling a warmth spread through him at her normalcy. "And a big bag of popcorn and a root beer if you got it." She nodded, her movements efficient. Within minutes, a classic hot dog nestled in a soft bun with a line of mustard, and a generous bag of freshly popped popcorn were placed before him. He sat at one of the picnic tables, usually crammed with families, now gloriously empty. He ate slowly, savoring each bite. The hot dog was simple, perfect. The popcorn was buttery and salty. It tasted like freedom, like youth, like forgotten simplicity. He ate without being watched, without needing to maintain an image. He didn't have to worry about a photographer catching him with a mouthful of mustard. He just ate. It was a profound, almost spiritual act of normalcy. As he finished wiping his mouth with a napkin, he leaned back, looking up at the sky where the first hints of dawn were beginning to streak the horizon. He thought about his life. The relentless pace, the constant demands, the golden cage. And then he thought about this night, this simple, extravagant, deeply necessary escape. He realized that true joy wasn't always found in grand gestures or roaring crowds. Sometimes it was found in the quiet hum of a carousel, the gentle spin of a teacup, or the satisfying crunch of a hot dog eaten alone under the vast, uncaring yet utterly beautiful night sky. He felt not just relaxed, but profoundly renewed as dawn approached, painting the eastern sky in soft pastels of pink and orange. Elvis felt a gentle nudge towards winding down his adventure. He'd ridden the bumper cars until his muscles protested. enjoyed the gentle sway of the carousel, and even indulged in some classic amusement park snacks. Now a quiet curiosity led him down a path less traveled, a service road behind the main concession stands that seemed to lead to the park's backstage areas. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just stretching his legs and soaking in the last moments of this unique solitude. He passed dusty storage sheds, their doors secured with heavy padlocks and piles of stacked equipment, faded plastic bins, deflated carnival prizes, and the silent sleeping parts of rides awaiting repair. The air here smelled faintly of grease, wood, and something indefinable, something old and forgotten. He rounded a corner and found himself in a small, neglected maintenance yard. A few rusted tools lay scattered on a workbench, and a stack of old, worn ride parts leaned precariously against a corrugated metal wall. It was a place of disarray, a stark contrast to the cheerful, manicured front of the park. His eyes fell upon an old wooden crate tucked away in a corner, partially hidden by a tangle of overgrown weeds. It looked like it hadn't been moved in decades. Curiosity, a driving force throughout his life, compelled him to approach it. He carefully nudged aside the weeds and peered inside. The crate was filled with a jumble of discarded items, faded ribbons, a broken prize wheel, and beneath it all, a small hand-painted wooden sign. It was chipped and peeling, the colors muted by time, but the lettering was still clear. He carefully pulled it out. The sign was no larger than a shoebox lid made of rough-hewn wood. On it, painted in slightly uneven, childlike letters, were two simple words: simple joys. Below the words, a crudely drawn stick-figure child was holding the balloon, a wide, joyful smile on his face. Paint was faded, perhaps from years of sun and rain, but the message was clear. It felt ancient, a relic from a different era, perhaps even from the park's earliest days. Elvis ran his thumb over the rough surface of the sign. Simple joys. The words resonated deep within him, echoing the very reason he was here. This small, forgotten piece of wood made by an unknown hand perfectly encapsulated the essence of his night. He imagined a child, perhaps the park owner's grandchild, meticulously painting this sign, believing in the power of a balloon, a carousel ride, or a bumper car collision to bring true happiness. It was a stark reminder of what he had often lost sight of in his own life: the grand successes, the roaring crowds, the extravagant possessions. They were incredible, yes, but they often overshadowed the quiet, personal moments that truly nourished the soul. He felt a deep sense of connection to this small, forgotten sign. It was a silent witness to countless moments of innocent happiness, a testament to the enduring power of simple pleasures. It reminded him that joy didn't always have to be loud or public or dazzling. Sometimes it was just a quiet hum, a gentle bump, a shared laugh, or a forgotten piece of painted wood. He smiled, a soft, contemplative smile that carried a hint of melancholy, but also a profound sense of gratitude. He knew he couldn't take the sign. It belonged to the park, a small piece of its history, a silent guardian of its purpose. But he could carry its message with him. Carefully placed the sign back into the crate, ensuring it was visible, perhaps hoping someone else might stumble upon its profound, simple truth. This unexpected discovery felt like a benediction, a quiet validation of his search. He hadn't just rented a park to ride bumper cars. He had stumbled upon a forgotten truth, a whisper from the past reminding him of the lasting value of simple joys. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the quiet maintenance yard, Elvis felt a lightness that went beyond physical relaxation. It was a lightness of the spirit, a quiet understanding of what truly mattered. As the sun began to truly rise, casting long shadows of the rides across the park, Elvis made his way back towards the main entrance. He felt a quiet reverence for the sleeping park, now bathed in the golden light of a new day. "Good morning, gentlemen," Elvis said, his voice warm. "Looks like a beautiful day." Mr. Henderson nodded, a tired but content smile on his face. "It is, Mr. Presley," I hope you enjoyed your private showing." He met Elvis's gaze, a quiet understanding passing between them. "More than you know, Mr. Henderson," Elvis replied, his gaze then settling on Billy, who was still trying to stifle a grin from their bumper. "Car adventure. Billy here showed me a thing or two about driving those cars. He's a natural." Billy blushed bright red, pleased and flustered all at once. "Ah, shucks, Elvis, you weren't bad yourself for a beginner." He clapped a hand over his mouth, realizing what he'd said, but Elvis just laughed. "Beginner, huh? I'll have you know I was a terror on those things back in the day," Elvis joked. Then his expression softened. "No, you were right. It's been a long time. It felt good to be a beginner again, though." He paused, then his eyes twinkled. I remember coming to places like this when I was a kid back in Tupelo. My mama, she'd save up all week, just so we could ride a few rides, maybe get a small treat. Those were some of the best times, simple things, He looked from Billy to Mr. Henderson, seeing a flicker of recognition in their eyes. He wasn't talking about Graceland or sold-out stadiums. He was talking about shared human experiences, about the universal longing for simple pleasures. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "I understand, Mr. Presley. This park has been in my family for 3 generations. It's not just rides and concession stands. It's memories for so many people. We try to keep that spirit alive. Sometimes it's hard to remember that, when the bills pile up and the crowds thin out. But then you see a kid's face light up on the carousel, or hear the laughter from the bumper cars, and you remember why you do it." Elvis nodded slowly, a profound connection forming in the quiet of the morning. "That's it exactly," he said softly. "That joy. That's the real gold, isn't it?" He looked at Billy. "You got a good job here, son. You're helping make those memories for folks." Billy, feeling less intimidated and more seen than ever before, straightened his shoulders a bit. "Yeah, I guess so, Elvis. I like it. Especially the bumper cars. Nothing beats hearing that clang." Elvis grinned. "You got that right." He then looked back at Mr. Henderson. "I want to thank you again truly for this. It wasn't just a night out. It was a reset, a reminder." He felt a wellspring of gratitude. This wasn't just a business transaction. It was a moment of profound human connection, a shared understanding of life's simple, enduring truths. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, more than enough to cover the rental fee and a significant bonus. "Please, Mr. Henderson, this is for you and for Billy, and for anyone else who helped keep this place going tonight for the memories." Henderson's eyes widened at the sight of the money, but he quickly regained his composure. "Mr. Presley, you've already been more than generous." "It's not just about the money," Elvis insisted gently. "It's about this place. Keep those simple joys going." He paused. "And if you ever need a bumper car mechanic, you know who to call." He winked, a playful glint in his eyes. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the gentle sounds of the awakening park. It was a moment of shared humanity, stripped of celebrity and expectation, leaving only the genuine exchange of gratitude and respect. Elvis felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that this quiet, extraordinary night had brought not just joy to himself, but perhaps a little hope to the heart of Adventureland. The sky was now painted in the vibrant hues of a full sunrise, casting long golden streaks across Adventureland. The air was crisp, carrying the promise of a warm day, and the park, usually silent before opening, felt alive with a quiet, lingering energy. Elvis knew his time was drawing to a close. His limousine was waiting discreetly at the service entrance, Joe Esposito already coordinating the departure, but before he left, he felt compelled to do one more thing, one last round. He walked back to the bumper car arena, which had been tidied up by Billy, the cars sitting neatly in their spots, awaiting a new day of collisions. Mr. Henderson and Billy followed, understanding the unspoken desire. "One last time, boys," Elvis announced, a wistful smile on his face, "before I have to go back to being Elvis." climbed into his favorite blue car, feeling its familiar hum of power beneath him. Billy, sensing the moment, didn't hesitate. He hopped into the yellow car, ready for a final playful chase. Mr. Henderson, leaning against the fence, watched the scene unfold with a rare lightness in his eyes. This last session was different from the first. There was still the raw joy of impact, the thrill of the chase, but it was tinged with a peaceful sadness, a recognition of an ending. Elvis drove with a quiet deliberation, savoring each bump, each spin. He wasn't as wild or reckless as before. Instead, he seemed to be soaking in every sensation, committing it to memory. He deliberately sought out Billy's car, bumping him gently, playfully, not with the intention to overwhelm, but to share a final wordless moment of connection. Billy, understanding, would reciprocate, their cars dancing across the arena floor in a silent ballet of farewell. As the sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the metal arena, Elvis finally brought his car to a slow, deliberate halt. He sat for a moment, his hands still on the wheel, letting the hum of the electricity fade, letting the silence settle in. He closed his eyes, inhaling the scent of ozone and metal, imprinting it on his memory. He unbuckled, stepping out of the car. Feeling a profound sense of peace, he felt renewed, cleansed. The weight he'd carried, the burden of fame, felt lighter, almost lifted. He hadn't escaped his life, but he had, for a few precious hours, escaped the performance of it. He had found a part of himself he thought was long gone. He walked over to Mr. Henderson and Billy, who stood waiting. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere and heartfelt. "Both of you. This night, it's meant more than words can say." He looked directly at Billy, a knowing look in his eyes. "Keep those bumper cars clanging, son, and remember to have fun, no matter what." Billy, his face alight with a mixture of awe and genuine affection, simply nodded. Too overwhelmed to speak, Elvis turned to Mr. Henderson. "This part, Mr. Henderson, it's special. You've got something truly unique here, don't ever forget that." Mr. Henderson, usually reserved, reached out and clasped Elvis's hand, a firm, honest grip. "Thank you, Mr. Presley, for reminding me of that, and for everything." Elvis nodded, a final warm smile on his lips. He turned and walked towards the waiting limousine, his steps lighter, his posture a little straighter. He didn't look back, he didn't need to. The memory of the clanging cars, the simple laughter, and the quiet camaraderie would be etched in his mind. As the car pulled away, Elvis looked out the window, watching Adventureland disappear in his rear-view mirror. Park, usually a place of public spectacle, had become his private sanctuary, a haven where he could shed the gold, lame, and simply be a man in a bumper car, finding pure joy in the simplest of collisions. The feeling lingered, a warmth in his chest, a gentle hum of contentment that promised to stay with him long after the echoes of the bumper cars faded into memory. The drive back to Graceland was quiet, bathed in the soft, early morning light. Elvis sat in the back of the limousine, not asleep, but in a state of tranquil reflection. The world outside was slowly waking up, preparing for another bustling day. But inside, a quiet transformation had occurred. The king had gone seeking a simple escape, and he had found so much more. He had expected a fleeting moment of fun, a brief respite from the pressures of his life. What he hadn't anticipated was the profound sense of peace, the genuine connection to a forgotten part of himself, and the unexpected human warmth from Mr. Henderson and Billy. As the gates of Graceland swung open, revealing the familiar grandeur of his home, Elvis felt a strange blend of anticipation and readiness. He wasn't dreading a return to his public life. He felt surprisingly invigorated, as if he'd been on a long, refreshing journey. Joe Esposito, always observant, caught his eye in the rearview mirror. "Everything all right? Elvis, you look different." Elvis smiled. A genuine, easy smile. "Better than all right, Joe. I feel lighter, like a kid again." He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. "You know those bumper cars, they really hit the spot. It was like I remembered them. Simple, pure." He thought of the weathered, Simple Joys sign, tucked away in the dusty crate. He didn't need to own it. Its message was already deeply ingrained. He thought of Billy's uninhibited laughter and Mr. Henderson's quiet understanding. He had gone seeking solitude, but had found connection. Over the next few days, the ripple effect of that night became subtly apparent. Elvis's famous energy was back, but it felt more grounded, less frenetic. He seemed less prone to the mood swings that often plagued him. He laughed more easily, his eyes holding a renewed sparkle. His band members and inner circle noticed it. "Elvis seems to be in a good mood," someone would remark. "Must have had a good night's sleep." He found himself looking at the world with a slightly altered perspective. The grand scale of his fame, while still immense, felt less overwhelming. He began to seek out more moments of genuine, simple happiness in his daily life. He'd spend more time strumming his guitar on the porch, not practicing for a show, but simply playing for the sheer joy of the music. He'd take quiet walks on the Graceland grounds, noticing the details he often overlooked. He'd play a game of touch football with his friends, truly immersed in the moment rather than just going through the motion. He still had his responsibilities, his concerts, his movies. The golden cage was still there, but now he understood that he held the key to its door. He could choose to step outside, if only for a few hours, and find himself again in the simple joys of the world. He realized that true wealth wasn't just about what you owned, but about the moments of authentic happiness you allowed yourself to experience. The bumper car adventure became a cherished, secret memory, a touchstone he could return to in his mind whenever the pressures of being the king became too great. It was a reminder that beneath the sequins in the spotlight, he was still just Elvis, the boy from Tupelo who loved a good laugh in the exhilarating crash of a bumper car. And that boy, he realized, was still alive and well, ready to emerge whenever the simple joys of life called to him. The night at Adventureland had not just been a ride, it had been a homecoming.